Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much to the organisers for inviting me to speak today. Not a very scientific talk I'm about to give here, and probably quite brief as well, so hopefully we'll catch up some time. First of all, I'd just like to thank, in particular, Chris and Melanie for just a couple of fantastic talks. I was busy taking notes, and it's going to have quite a big impact, I think, on some of the work that we're doing here. These are my disclosures. And so I'm going to start with a problem statement. And this problem statement reflects sort of my agenda to an extent, which is parallel to and overlapping with the Open Kinetic Modeling Initiative agenda. I'm very interested in long axial field of view and total body PET. And these scanners, they're growing. There's more of them about, but they remain rare. And so access to data for people to play with this stuff is a problem. Now, I guess my agenda is I want people to play with this data because I want people to get excited by it so that they then go out and maybe go and get themselves some long axial field of view scanners, and we see that particular aspect of the field expand. Okay, there's another problem here. So total body kinetic data analysis, and I won't necessarily say kinetic modeling, but kinetic data analysis is still in its infancy. We've got tons and tons, decades of experience of single organ analysis, but total body analysis is still something that is quite new. There's lots of problems to be solved. There's lots of discoveries that remain to be made, and too many for any one group. And I think this sort of follows on from the discussion that we just had with Melanie a little bit, which is that yes, when you share data, you could get scooped, but actually the parameter space for things to work on here is so big that I think we're better served by getting the data out there if we can and getting lots and lots of people to work on it. And then many of the problems in total body PET data analysis are common, and time can be wasted reinventing the wheel. So it would be nice if some of those tools, or at least some of those tools that we can share in a practical sense, were indeed shared. Okay, so I'm going to start talking a little bit about data sharing. This is something that we thought about very early on when we started with the first total body PET scanner in the US, what we were going to do with this data. So we've got a whole bunch of data sets that we could share with varying degrees of complexity. The very first cohort that we acquired was just a healthy subjects cohort, actually, and that has proved to be a very, very rich data set. Lots of people are interested in it. This isn't in any sense a complete list of all the data sets that we have at UC Davis, but these are studies where I'm the PI, so you can talk to me and I can get you the data. So I've kind of left it at that, really. So you can see we've got a whole bunch of FDG stuff, scans with these healthy subjects. We typically acquired, in the data sets that I'm showing here, we've acquired the first 60 minutes of data dynamically. And then we have a series of late time point scans, some of them going out as far as 12 hours. This in turn means that we've also got a whole bunch of CT scans as well on these same patients, which are also potentially of interest. In terms of cancer patients, we don't typically acquire dynamic data on our cancer patients. So I have a protocol where we're acquiring some data, and we've been sort of slowly adding to that. We have a recharge rate, which means I have to pay recharge on our scanner, which means that this is not something I can just trivially do for every first patient of the day in the morning. So my data set perhaps is not as complete as it might be, but we have 16 patients there where we have the full data with FDG. And then what I think is actually a pretty cool data set, for a good while before PSMA came along, we were doing flucyclovine imaging in prostate cancer. That's stopped now, but all those patients that we got, almost all of them, we have the full 25-minute dynamic data on those patients. So that's a nice little data set there. We've got about a bit over 120 studies. So that's a nice data set that I think there's a lot of interest there. And as I say, if you wanted to do that now, it would be extremely expensive to acquire, whereas we did that clinically, and all we had to do was ask our patients whether they'd consent for us to play with the data afterwards, and 126 of them did so. All right, and then we have a bunch of other data. As you will be unsurprised to know, it became rapidly impossible to store every patient's list mode data. Nevertheless, we do have a couple of petabytes of storage on site, and we have got about 2,000 exams where we do have the list mode data. And these are studies where the patients, again, have consented for the data to be played with. So they are potentially available for sharing. And likewise with these dotatate scans, we don't have the full dynamic data set, but we've got 20 minutes of list mode data that has some kinetic information in it. So a number of people have approached us to look and play with the data. So what do we have to do? So at the moment, we have ad hoc solutions to this problem. So everybody, we have to sign an individual data transfer agreement with the institution that's involved. So what happens is that I'll get a request, we'll look at it and we'll think, oh no, this could be cool. So then I have to ask our legal team to initiate, and they produce a template document. That gets sent over to the other receiving institution who redline it and then send it back, and our legal people then cross out all the red lines and send it back, and after about 3 or 4 times the institution gets bored of it and decides, okay, we'll settle. So now we've got some kind of agreement that gets signed. Our academic agreements for this data are these so far. I'm not even sure this is exhaustive, actually. This doesn't include our industrial collaborators as well, so there's more of those. So there's a whole number of, a good number of those, and all of these go through one grants administrator. So you can imagine, and I don't doubt, actually, looking at the audience here, there's probably a number of people who've been twiddling their thumbs and are quite pissed off at us, actually, for how long it's taken us to actually execute these agreements. I'm looking here, I'm definitely can see 1 or 2 people there in the audience. Okay, so after some months, actually the time level varies with how populated the Office of Research is with staff. So when they're well staffed, it takes a couple of weeks. And when they're badly staffed, it can take 6 months. So we got this kind of sine wave thing about how long it takes to do these things. So let's assume we've got that done. We've spent some months' time doing that. Next step, we have to anonymize the data. And of course, this is DICOM data. There's typically, if we're doing images, it's fairly easy to find DICOM anonymizers out there. Anybody who has anonymized PET data, however, will rapidly learn that if you do brute force very conservative anonymization, you end up with PET data that you cannot read. So you do have to play with that. You have to get that right. All of that is done by one person, Dr. Benjamin Spencer, at where we are. And then anonymization, actually, with total body or long axial field of view PET, is not just about DICOM. So every single one of these studies has a high-resolution CT scan with it, which, because it's long axial field of view, includes the head and therefore has a face which is renderable. Those of you who know our healthy subjects cohort well will probably recognize who this is. I shall not say who it is, but I shall leave the audience to guess who that might be. Certainly facial recognition software could have a good go at de-anonymizing that data with data of that quality. My postdoc at Time Air and Selfridge had a look at this and came up with a defacing algorithm, which he then validated using some facial recognition software. And it's kind of obvious what you're going to do this. This problem's been addressed in neuroscience, I think, some time ago. One thing that perhaps you might not expect is, well, the PET data is now coming from these scanners that are actually pretty good these days. These high-performance PET data are also renderable, depending on the tracer we've got, I guess. But certainly for FDG, they are most definitely renderable. And indeed, you can apply facial recognition software to that, and you can have a pretty good go at recognizing that face too. So then you also have to do something to smear out the face if you want this to be generally anonymizable so that you can send this out to lots of different people. This is not something that is necessary in terms of regulations right yet. Yeah, so our IRB is not telling us to do this. But it's kind of pretty obvious that we're going to have to do this in the future. And frankly, I'm kind of uncomfortable if I were to, say, set up a database so that anybody can download our data, then I'm kind of uncomfortable putting volunteers' data. I don't think they signed up for that. So we kind of want to do something then to make sure that they're safely anonymized. If you do, of course, and then we talked a little bit about the troubles with sharing raw data, which of course is a whole nother ball of wax. We're not really talking about sharing raw data. If you do, and you deface the data, you now potentially run into reconstruction problems. We had a quick look at that, and we found you can see, where's the pointer going here? Is that working? Oh, here we go. No, it's not here. Ah, there we go. Sorry about this. Ah, there we go. Oh, okay, right. There we look at that. All right. Okay, I'll see if I can make this work. So you can see if we reconstruct the PET data using the D-phased CT, then we get some differences which whose fractional change is actually quite significant. The absolute frag change is not so bad, luckily. But if you are interested in nasopharyngeal disease or looking at melanoma in the face, potentially you've got a bit of an issue here, which you may have to address. But then on the other hand, another way of looking at this is that's talking about sharing raw data, and this is probably the least of our worries, actually, if we're going to share raw data. All right, so moving on. Practical data transfer. So you will remember this list, okay? So these are all the people that we're trying to transfer data to. So who gets to actually do that and make sure the data ends up at the receiving site? Well, it's the same guy. It's this poor old Ben. So if you were to come to me with a collaborative idea, say, you know, I've got this deep learning idea and I want to do pattern recognition on your 1,500 data sets that you said you had, Ben is going to look at me and going, you've got to be kidding. So you know, there are some serious limitations here. So I think we've got a problem here. So we're going to try and address that problem. And so what are our goals? Well, in phase one, what we would like to do is to create a repository for easy data sharing, at least by the host institution, i.e. us. We are working very closely with the Medical University of Vienna as well. They have the Siemens scanner, so it'd be really nice if our initial data repository could have data from both scanners. And we would like then to be to enable access for investigators at all levels, actually. I can think of some fabulous high school projects that you could do if you had access to this data easily and you didn't have a 6 months waiting period to get the data transfer agreement done. So it's not just about the repository then. We also need a template for easy data transfer agreement instantiation. Or pretty well all of our consent forms have something about the data staying on site unless there's a data transfer agreement. We have to have a data transfer agreement to let the data out of the shop. And then we would also like to create a platform for easy software sharing, at least with some limited set of applications which we think are going to commonly be used. And then moving forward to phase two, what we would like to do is to do something similar to the BIDS thing there, is to create a repository for easy data sharing by everybody who wants to play. So that can be done by sort of ad hoc data curation methods if you've got 2 or 3 or 5 sort of contributors, I think. Getting it to be more than that, and you need to really start thinking about really resourcing your data curation. Something I learned recently is we tried to submit some data to the Cancer Imaging Archive from our long axial field of view PET scanner, and honestly, it was the curation aspect of it was a bit of a nightmare, actually. It took us about, that whole project, completely unfunded, of course, took about 6 months of toing and froing before we finally got the data up there. So the curation aspect of this is not to be lightly ignored here. We'd also like to create some kind of cloud-based software platform to democratize some of the access, to democratize access to at least some of the software, some of which can be quite computationally intensive. Not everybody has access to the high-performance computers. Maybe we can provide some service in that area too. And we'd like to create, yes.
I just want to let you know you have about a minute left.
A minute left. I shall speed up then. Okay, create an I thought this was going to be a short talk. Oh my word. Create an international collaborative culture in this space. This means paying attention to local restrictions, of course. Like in China, for example, the data doesn't leave the hospital. So anything that has to be done collaboratively has to do federated learning or some approach like that. Okay, so the other part of this is software sharing, and there are two parts to this. There's, of course, the OpenKMI Model Initiative code initiative that Gulbar has already talked about today. And then there are our collaborators out in Vienna. They've got two packages here for multi-organ segmentation and also motion correction. They are generating a whole menagerie of products that they want people to use and share in segmentation, motion correction. You can read it all here, multimodal image registration, network analysis, anomaly tracking. And how are we going to bring it all together? Well, just so happens that at UC Davis, we have what's called a Health Cloud Innovation Center, which is a collaboration with Amazon Web Services. Keisuke Nakagawa is the guy in charge of it. And their mission really is to address digital health equity and get global access where global access is possible. If you look at what they're trying to do, global collaboration, digital health equity, and open source innovation actually ties in really well with what we're trying to do here, which is cool, because that means we can now tap into some of those Amazon Web Services resources, perhaps host this data set, also perhaps host Dockerized instantiations of this software and get people access to the data. So just in summary then, efforts are underway to easily share total body and LFL PET data to help crowdsource new analytic methods and approaches. Efforts are underway to share the data processing tools to minimize real reinvention, and if you've got a good idea before we've got all that in place, give me a shout, and if you're prepared to wait a while, maybe you can get access to our data too. Thank you very much.